What's going on YouTube? It's Biggs. We're back at it again with another One Piece card game video. Today I'm kind of hopping on the content creator train of what should be banned, do we deserve a ban list, etc., etc., etc. I know it's the new height for content creators. It's easy content. Um, I'm going to talk about it, but I'm also going to talk about some opinions that I've seen through Twitter, community, Facebook posts, etc. I do read a lot. I'll also start with saying, I started with that Star Wars video as like my first thing since Nats. Mostly because again, I'm going to be playing the game. I do want to give the game some exposure from a community that probably never thought of it as an interesting game to get into. Just because for some younger people, Star Wars isn't really that cool. I get it. I'm older. I like it. It's fun. The gameplay, I hope if you took the time to watch the video, was really cool. But since Nats, I kind of took a break. I put in a lot of time and effort, sacrificed family time, personal time to focus on like school, etc., to try and get myself ready. You know, 7-3 was our record. It is what it is. Can't really do anything about it. I had no problems with the way I played. I was extremely fatigued, and I was still overcoming that to try and win games. So again, with the exception of the one play, I won't get into it. I felt really good about how I did in Nats. It's just, it's a TCG. You are playing against another opponent, and sometimes luck favors the better, the other deck and not you. So that was it. Um, what else can we talk about? Okay. So one opinion that I've seen from the community, pro players and content creators alike, um, is that the game doesn't need bans. It shouldn't have bans. We shouldn't have that in our game. I think that's grossly incorrect. I think it's irresponsible to be putting that message out there for the community to latch onto. I understand people don't want to step on people's toes, but in this channel, I've never been afraid to do that. So again, I think it's grossly uh, irresponsible, incompetent, just because the game, the way it is 5 sets in, 6 sets soon, is we're playing a game where there's no rotation. All the cards are legal all the time. And again, that leads to unintended combinations of cards, relevance for older cards that you would think are like, oh, that's good because, older leaders and cards are seeing play. However, that also leads to some cards having unintended interactions, I would assume, or untested interactions, because let's be real, I've been playing a lot of TCGs in my life, and the creators do not do the best testing. The community does the best testing for the game and figures out things way better, way faster. Um, like the Black Yellow Luffy thing, where you're able to use Moria, grab two of the little kids from the graveyard, sacrifice the kids from the graveyard to get two characters like the Ace, the Luffy, and the Sabo from life to buff your leader to 9k in a turn. You can do that repeatedly so long as you have Moria, which is easy because Black Sabo draws you 2 cards. So you're digging, you're digging, you're digging, you're finding what you need. I'm not saying that's not a really cool deck, a fun deck to play uh, as the person piloting the deck, but some decks just sitting across from it look at it and it's like, wow, that's a 9k leader. I can't do crap. That's what I'm talking about. So for the longevity of the game, for the macro, not the micro, just right now, I think again people need to start looking outside of themselves. Of, oh, but I like to play this. I had to do the same thing. Trust me, I played Dad. Okay, I've defended Dad. I've also been on the other side and said, okay, I understand Dad does a little too much, and I agree. And that's why when we're talking about cards that are worth talking about, Dad is always a contender. So before we hop into my personal picks, my thoughts, I also want to say that Bandai, if you are listening to the community posts, when you're approaching the ban list, you need to take it from multiple views. You also cannot be heavy-handed and focus on one color. I think introducing a ban list, i.e. like Yu-Gi-Oh, because again, Yu-Gi-Oh is another one of those games where they don't have a traditional rotational format where it's okay to have some broken things here and there and then they rotate out eventually. Again, that's just another sentiment for the that first argument of like we shouldn't ban anything. It's incorrect because we don't have rotation. There's no, oh, it's broken right now, but it won't be in the future. Or they can print, like, the further we go into, oh, I'm just going to print the new counter to the old meta is a road that I don't think we should be going on. I think that's really bad card design. Oh, we let's make a card that, fixes that. Like, that does nothing. That's just really bad design and just shows that you don't care about overall balance. So I think addressing it for what it is, it's okay to admit you made a mistake, and addressing multiple colors at the same time, maybe hitting cards that we're not thinking about, or maybe some of the community. A lot of you guys are grossly incompetent when it comes to evaluating cards. Um, like, you need to address everything, the full spectrum of cards. I'm being a little conservative here because, again, I do think that we should do this lightly. I'm not going to say that we shouldn't do it, but I also think you have to play with it a little bit, and see how it goes. So Whitebeard would be one of those things. If we're going to address everything at one time, which we should, then I think Whitebeard is a fair pick. The 9-drop, again, if he falls off, I think 9-drop is okay to stay, just because removal is pretty good. However, if we do address multiple cards in black, then maybe it's not okay. I also think that other colors deserve harder removal or better ways to answer bigger things than other bigger things. I think that's kind of like how the green Dofi came about. It's like green doesn't really have answers to board. They can rest things, they can put up a wall, but when it comes to actually dealing with things that isn't just like little red creatures, it gets a little weird. And Dofi was kind of like the only way to go over the top. And again, you have to be in a position where you can resolve this and not die to like a whole board of things. So he's one of those picks I just threw on there because I understand how it feels like, oh, multiple nines, multiple 10, multiple 10 mom. Like, I understand how bad that feels, but it is a weakness of green is that they don't have card draw. The most they have are searchers, and it's usually one archetype searcher that doesn't find other things. So if they're lucky enough to find multiple Dofi, it is just RNG. I don't think it's the worst. I just threw him on there because I know, again, it's something that community sentiment, it just feels bad. It's a feels bad. It's a feels bad for any of these big guys, to be honest with you. With the exception, well, not really. I was going to say with the exception of black, but like multiple Moria is going to be pretty annoying. And then Dadan. Again, Zoro is an annoying leader. I think any red leader that gets printed out, you kind of have to compare to Zoro and say, is this just worse Zoro build? And I think so. I've seen people in Japan already talking about the Dragon leader. Granted, we haven't seen anything spoiled as far as characters for them besides Dragon 8-drop. That like take advantage of his ability, which is very unique, but I've also think that they've kind of pigeonholed themselves on red card design. I think they've given out too much of that creativity to other colors, specifically yellow and black. So it's really hard to design new red cards without just falling to the same holes of Searcher, Rush, Attach Arrested or something. Or really mediocre KO effects, which is another issue I'm having with the game, is something Card D Kaizugo has talked about quite a bit, is they introduce a mechanic or a set of abilities that are good, but the only way to counter it is in the same color, specifically black Borsalino. They have like strictly you cannot KO this card. Red has access to it kind of, but you're sacrificing cards in hand. Black just says no, my Borsalino is sticking unless you can bottom deck, which I think is dumb. So I do think that they've kind of pigeonholed themselves in card design for 1-drops, for red cards in general. I think they've kind of shot themselves in the foot. I also think this was also off the back of all the backlash that they had with, oh, red is too good. Where's the love for the other colors? Well, the other colors have caught up significantly, and I do think that, red deserves a little more attention. I'm not a fanboy. I haven't played red more than like 5 times in like competitive settings. This set, I played Whitebeard at the beginning just because I was still getting my Sokka cards, and I played Sokka at Nats. So, I in a competitive situation, I'm going to play what I feel good about and what's going to win. I have no affiliations with color, except the character Whitebeard. I just love Whitebeard as a character. I always have to give that out because I know someone in the comments is going to talk some crap. 10 Mom is there. Now, I'm going to put an asterisk on this because 10 Mom has a counter and it is aggressive strategies, uh, where she just feels awful to play. Dofi you can kind of play around that because Dofi rests the board, or not, freezes the board rather. So, depending on how they're set up, he can come down and help you stabilize, where 10 Mom, that's not always the case. In fact, sometimes it's just really bad compared to the other options in hand. So 10 Mom, again, another instance of where I understand why this card's freaking annoying. Um, but at the same time, there are ways to counter it in other colors. I understand, like, if you're playing Sakazuki, oh, but I can't deal with multiple 10 Moms. And first off, that's not true because I've done it. Two, it's okay to have a counter to your strategy. Um, and I do think that if Red were to have more presence by bringing back some, just a little bit of some of the other stuff in the format, then this is okay. I actually will say that I hate this card. I still will acknowledge that she does a whole lot. But again, she's a 10 drop, so it's okay. Rebecca, I think, is the opposite side. I think she does way too much for way too little restriction. As the community has said billions of times, she should have been leader locked to Rebecca. There's no reason why this card uh, can just be played in every black deck that's ever played, and generate as much value as she does. Uh, she's part of the new combo, the RHO combo, Rebecca Hina Lucci. Again, it's really cool to have this. I will acknowledge again before the red flamers come in. Red didn't have this restrictions, and I agree with you. There are cards that shouldn't be locked to leader. That shouldn't just be like, well, this goes in my Zoro deck. Again, a problem with Zoro's design, just because he's universally just good, where you can just put almost every good red card in the deck and it might just work. Um, Same thing goes with Rebecca. I think she's just way too strong. Um, this is not here because I want him banned. I'm putting him here because I'm going to argue against it. I think Lucci deserves to be a card in black. Uh, Black is the removal color. I also think that Law deserves a good counter. Seven Drop King is not a good card, not in this format. Um, Lucci, a good cost-effective card that gets rid of 2 cards is very good. I think this is fine. The stats are a little pushed. I will give you that. I think 4 cost 6k for what he does is probably too strong. Um, but at the same time, these cards need to exist to check older cards, aka Law, which is also another reason why Dadan is here, just because Law is always a deck that should be in the back of your mind. It just does a whole lot. Gecko Moria, I know people are saying that, oh, but it's OPO6. We haven't had a chance to play with it. That never stopped them from doing this to the boat, okay? We didn't get to play optimized Whitebeard, thank God, because that would have been way worse for all the crybabies that said that Whitebeard was too good. You don't want to play with this card in the deck. um, Moria, again, for the same reasons that I threw Rebecca on here, just does too much for no restriction or color restriction, which I thought was nuts. It's not that he can only grab black cards, he can grab any color cards, which is why he's played in Black Yellow Luffy. Um, I think locking him to Moria is okay. Um, at least, or Thriller Bark to Perona has access to. I think that's okay. Uh, because at least you can control it with what you print in the future if you decide to make a new Thriller Bark leader. But Moria as a card on its own just has way too much value. It's 8 cost 9k, which is decent stats, and grabs 2 bodies. So you can have upwards of like 16k worth of stats, which is nuts off of 8 Don across 3 bodies. You can do removal combos with him by grabbing, a cost reducer that costs 2 or less, and then a Lucci or an Absalom. Well, specifically Lucci when we're talking about like the splashability of this card. He's single-handedly the reason why Black Yellow Luffy is a deck. So again, the other side of this that people don't consider is that the macro decision. This card will always be played in every single black deck that's ever made because it has so much synergy. And then again, it limits design space because now you have to think, well, if I make a black X leader and I get to play this card, what do I potentially get access to as 4 drops and 2 drops, which also messes with card design. I think they've been pushing black a little too hard. I understand that it was pretty weak in set 2 and 3, um, mostly because they kind of handicapped themselves with the bad ban lists that they did at the time, where they only hit Whitebeard in a bad way and didn't really touch Zoro and stuff like that. So black, by comparison, just looked like an awful deck. So again, they needed to push it, and then they started making these cards, and it's a little too much now. They need to put the brake pedal on and relax a little bit with black card design. And I do think that Moria is, out of all the cards on the list, one of the biggest offenders and should not have existed in the first place, or not in the state that it's in now. I can say that I feel like Moria deserves a card like this. This is really cool for the deck. Without this, the deck would not function, so just outright banning it is bad. I would like them to do the Digimon style ban that they did, or limitation, whatever you want to call it, where if you're playing this with X, like you can't play A card with B card. You can play B card with C card, but you can't play A with B. So like an errata style or just an overall ruling that says Sokka or other leaders in general will not be able to access Moria. I think that's fair. It doesn't kill the strategy that's about to come out, but it does limit a deck that has way too many options as it is. For the same reasons we hated Zoro, Sokka will now have a leader ability that helps him search for cards, that digs for cards, and then a searcher that grabs a searcher. Or both searchers actually grab each other. So it's pretty stupid. It's They already have enough support. They're getting another Lucci style effect. If I were going to touch anything in black, it would be these two. Uh, Onami, I think, is a mistake. I understand they wanted to push the Yamato strategy. I think the deck is good as hell, but the fact that she's splashable in every deck because her trigger is literally Thunderbolt, while also having a 1k counter stat and a really strong on-play effect, there's like, what were they thinking when they made this card? Again, I understand people are like, oh, but we didn't get to play with it. I'm telling you, it's broken, okay? We should never had access to it to begin with. I think this is, again, another one of those things that make yellow really bad is for the game, is the trigger and the flip side of the card being too strong. This was an extremely pushed card in my opinion, and I don't think we should have access to this. Another card in that same vein is this Kikunojo. Uh, on curve stats, powerful trigger ability because unlike other yellow cards where you have to discard a card to play the card, you could just play this if your opponent's at 3, which is very easy. A lot of the four life leaders in the game are like some of the best leaders in the game to begin with. So getting them down to 3 with just one hit in like things like Katakuri, again, another card that's not locked to anything. So now we're talking about other decks just picking up anything that's good goes in my deck now. Like that's bad design. Like when would I play another yellow leader besides NL? You know what I mean? Um, Yamato's a little different because it's like a pants deck from Magic. Pants being like I go all in on one card and say I don't need anything else and I just try and win the game with the one card. Uh, Yamato's very reminiscent of that. um, but like I understand why they did these things so that they can push the new leader that they printed, but at the same time it pushes other strategies way too far ahead and also just limits other decks that can be played because how do you keep up with the value on this? Because unless you're blue, um, it's really hard to ignore a 4 cost 6k every turn, um, or even answering it with black only removal. Just giving them the free life, that's terrible. um, Hiyori, another broken yellow card in my opinion. She's a 2K counter, and she will let you stack a trigger on your life. You draw your top life card and put one card from your hand on top. So like a mini Big Mom effect from the starter deck, but also has a 2K counter body. Too much value in my opinion. I understand Red has a lot of these really efficient 2K counters that do a lot of different things. Um, but because of how volatile triggers can be, I think it's a bad card design-wise. And I think it just does too much. This is not Otama. This is not Makino. This is really powerful, in my opinion. Um, and without things like Curly Dodon, I actually think those 2K counters are fine. Granted, Hiyori doesn't have a searcher. She does, but not really. Um, and people would argue, well, like, oh, I can whiff off of my other searchers and like my yellow decks. I get it, but at the same time, you have to acknowledge this is a really powerful effect. Radical Beam, again, if we are addressing everything in the room, I do think, again, it's still a card that should have never been printed. There's no reason why the most aggressive, what should be the most aggressive color, has access to one of the best defensive counters in the game for one Dawn. And then Houndblaze, this is literally a black card. No other blue deck will play this card because there's no 2-drops in the game that matter. This is literally just a black card for Sakazuki. Obviously, it's his ability. So this just does too much. It gives access to too much anti-KO effects. It just lets you do too much to answer that. Like in a deck that should focus on KO removal, having access to just basically free bottom deck is too strong. Another person, I think Kaizoku, said Ice Age. I could see why. It's just easy cost reduction, a large amount of cost reduction for one Dawn. And I understand why. I think this is a little pushed. The trigger is also kind of annoying sometimes. The only trade-off, the only argument I can give is that you're also adding to the cards that you have to play for the turn, or going down in cards in hand to try and answer cards. But the problem with that argument, why I kind of agree with Kaizoku on this one, is this deck is sacrificing that hand advantage to get bored and also remove threat. And that is how they win the game, because One Piece is a game of board. You need to be developing your board in order to win, with the exception of things like Nami. But for the most part, you're winning the game by playing to the board, and Black is the only deck that is removing really big things while also developing a really strong wide board sometimes. And it's definitely a little pushed. And then having access to just this one piece of combo that can remove potentially 10-drop Mom, 9-Beard, 10-drop Dofi, like any of these big monsters, and for cheap, and also playing Rebecca, Hina, Lucci, and having like 3 bodies on board. I think it's a bit too much. So again, I can agree with this. I think Amaru is a big offender, not as bad as Houndblaze, but is also really annoying for setting up these really annoying one-turn kills, or rewarding you for being low on life, which I do think should be a thing, but I don't think that yellow deserved this kind of effect. I felt like this should have been like a green effect, which they basically printed green Amaru in OP07 if you haven't seen it. It's literally almost the same thing, but you have to rest one of your characters to do it, which is kind of stupid. I feel like the trade-off, because of how yellow plays, this isn't really that bad. It's not as free as something like Houndblaze. Houndblaze is just dumb. But yeah, so I do think Amaru just kind of cheats. Like yellow is kind of like purple in that like they kind of cheat on their keywords. They have access to almost every keyword in the game at the cost of life, but the way yellow is played, like sometimes it's not really a disadvantage in the way like how Whitebeard was drawing his life to do stuff. Yellow has some of that to it, and I think they've given out too many tools and toys for yellow, and they kind of have to reel it in a little bit. which is also why I don't like the zero cost scanner. I know this seems really innocuous, like why is this a big deal? One of the problems and one of the reasons why I've won a lot of matches into yellow is that they have a lot of no counter cards. Even things like Amaru just rot in the hand unless they're ready to go for game. And then giving them a free out to turn any of these cards into a counter, I think was bad card design. Like, let them have a weakness. Like, stop printing cards that just make yellow better. It's okay, again, for decks to have bad matchups. You shouldn't be able to just play out of everything. And this zero cost event, I think, is should not have been in yellow. You can give it to every other color. Not, and even then, even purple, like I don't think should have had it. I understand why it's there. Don't get me wrong. There are decks that just have a lot of non-counters and stuff like this is just a way to circumvent that. But again, I don't think every color should have had it. Um, but yeah, and then obviously boat. One card I did miss that I don't think should ever come off is the Kabaji. There's Kabaji shouldn't come off. I think letting Nami have access to this again would just be a mistake. And the same thing with boat. If we kept Whitebeard and then just gave us back the boat, um, I don't think he beats the top decks. I've actually been playing with this in the anything goes option on the sim, and sometimes just you fall behind this crap, and it just doesn't matter that your leader swings 8 because it's not unblockable, so they can just chump. Um, this also eats up card slots in the deck, so now your deck space just gets that much harder to build around. So it's pretty annoying. So this isn't just I slam this again and I win. But at the same time, there are other matchups that aren't the top decks in the format where like this just gatekeeps, and I'm not a fan of decks that just gatekeep other decks from formats just by existing. Um, which is why I didn't like Yellow Mom for a while. But again, if we were to really take the game under our microscope and address like what we want colors to do, which is also something I feel like we've been lacking is color identity. I feel like if we narrowed in and just balanced so that each one does what it's supposed to do in a semi-fair way, I think we'd be okay. Um, and then I couldn't add him because I threw Whitebeard up there. I don't think he's not been in contention for best deck in the format, but I also do think that design-wise, again, like when you're talking about new yellow cards, you can't not talk about him. I think he's borderline a mistake. You can play around his ability by trading into their board, making it much harder for them to gain card advantage. But at the same time, sometimes your deck has no other option. Like he is the opposite of what yellow has. Like these big mom pirates always had a problem with aggression. He's on the opposite end of the spectrum. Like he's okay with it, and he doesn't play too bad into the control your style decks like black. And I don't think that makes sense. Granted, he's yellow is an RNG color. Like I played against someone earlier today who cried like, "Oh, I had no triggers on my life. What is this? That's so unfair." Like you're playing yellow, bro. Like you can't cry about it. You're rolling the dice a little bit. Like you have high probability, yeah, but so there is that as a weakness, but RNG is I don't know. So yeah, I would throw him on there potentially as the only 2 leaders in the game worth banning. And then another point that Kaisergu has made that he's awesome content creator. Like watching him come up and just blow up the way he has is really cool. He's got really good content, so go watch him. Is that leader effects that have been coming out should not be free. I think having free leader effects are dumb unless they're really minute small advantages, and even then you have to really think about like these effects are worth like a don or two a turn, and then giving some of them just outright broken abilities. Like imagine if Whitebeard said at the end of the turn, um, you know, rest 1 to add the card from the top of your life area to your hand, or trash it. Would that be fair? I think so. That's 1 Don that really messes with the math for a turn. Um, like things like this Yamato. Again, both abilities are free. Uh, Perona is another one. This is a really powerful ability that she gets access to. The -1 is negligible, but the fact that she can just rest anything 4 costs or less uh, is definitely worth 1 Don. And then the fact that it's in colors that take advantage of that ability is a little too good. You could have made this cost 1. Again, it just messes with the math and the way like certain leader abilities should. Because there's literally no drawback to this. Uh, like he was very close to being on there for me, but at the same time, green and purple just kind of fall behind to the oppressiveness that is black. Um, but he was very close to being on that list of just like, why is this okay? Just letting you tap out for free every turn, and then hold up counter events, which is another issue I have with the game. I'm getting off topic here a little bit, but like events, event counters rather are really bad cards. Like very rarely can you leave up 2 Don without sacrificing a lot of what you could have done in a turn. I think acknowledging that is something we should do in the future. I don't think that 0 cost events is the answer to that. But just giving like, you know, these 1 Don events were, Rad Beam's an offender because it costs 1 for way too much value. But some of these 2 cost events are just not worth playing. Like, when's the last time you saw one that isn't played in like Dofi? It's very hard to just stick them in there. Um, you might be able to stick 2 in the Yamato tank deck, but even then, it's just mid. To just leave up 2 Don like that. So that's all I have to say about the game. I really hope that you guys are looking at the game from a bigger lens. Stop looking at it just in the here and now. Stop looking at it from just I like XYZ deck, so therefore it's okay because red had its time to shine. That's such a dumb argument. um, what's that saying? Like you cut off your nose to spite your face. Um, that's a really big one. Is like you'd rather play really unhealthy bad formats just because we played one that you didn't like, but now there's a bunch of other people on the other side of the fence with the same opinion that you had. Like you have to think outside yourself. You have to really think about what's healthy for the longevity of the game, because again, unless we get announcements that we're going to have some sort of rotation, um, uh, or a comprehensive ban list, not just emergency band-aid fixes, which was what Bandai did, which was awful. Um, you know, we're gonna live in this situation where like something's just too good every time. And I understand that's the nature of TCGs. Don't get me wrong. There's will always be a best deck or maybe 2 decks at most that'll just outshine everything else. But I would like to see the game be a little more inclusive. I understand that again, in both our format and the '06 format in Japan, we've seen multiple decks top. But I'm looking more at the health of the game and how card design can be improved upon, rather than just you know only using that as my argument. Like, well, Luffy top, Enel top, Sakazuki top. See, that's healthy. There's 3 decks. But we're also talking about a game that has like 40 liters or something like that, and we're only getting bigger. So again, I'm trying to think more than just the here and now, which I hope this video helps you to do. And if not, go ahead and flame me in the comments. I always look forward to it. All right. If you've been watching this long, though, thank you so much. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Peace.